Hi guys, my name is Zach. In the previous video we set up animations for our enemy character so that he can attack and run. In this video we'll be using those animations to allow our enemy to actually kill our player. Let's go ahead and get started. First thing we want to do is actually head on over to the scene view. And our enemy here actually needs to have a collision box for his attack animation. So I'm going to go into my assets, monsters, sprites, and then for the attack animation, I'm actually going to update his sprite to the image where he's attacking so that we can create a collision box for that attack. And give him a new box collider. Oh, because we need a box collider 2D. That makes sense. And we're going to edit this one. So it just gave him this big box. We don't need that. So this is going to be just the collision box of his attack. So it is going to be set as a trigger. And it's only going to be as big as his attack. So if you jump over it, you won't get hit by it. Okay. Now in our enemy script, we need to give him some logic. So we'll open this up in Visual Studio. Okay, now that Visual Studio is open, you see that when we already have an on trigger enter. This is referring to if the sword enters the collision box for the enemy. We're actually going to do the same thing for the mushrooms attack. So this collision box actually needs to be put on a child object. So let's go ahead and do that real quick. I'm going to copy the component, create a new child component, so create empty while right clicking on the mushroom. Okay, and then I'm going to paste component as new. Now I can go back to the original one and delete this extra collision box. Alright, so now when the mushroom starts up, we need to get this child object, and we need to give a tag to this item. We're going to call it attack. And we're going to apply that to the child object here. Now in our code, when we first start up the game, the mushroom needs to figure out what his attack object is. So we're going to create a variable to store that attack object. It's going to be a game object. It's not equal to anything at the start, but when the game fires up in the start method, which is the first thing, or one of the first things that Unity will run in an object, we're actually going to get his child component. So get child, you're going to have to do transform.getChild. He only has one child, so we're going to get the one at the first index, which is 0. And game object. And this is our attack box. So attack box equals transform.getChild game object. Okay, so that is good. We're going to need an attack method. So private void attack. Now I'm going to go over a bit of code here that we actually did in the previous tutorial for enemy animations, but I'm going to go over it again because it's important for this logic to exist so that our enemy knows how to seek our player and attack him. If you already did this part, feel free to skip ahead. Now what we want to do is we actually want to write a fixed update method because our character is going to be moving. So fixed update, And what we need to do is detect if the player is within a certain distance of the enemy, and if so, we want to change the direction of our enemy and start moving toward him. So let's go ahead and create a distance. And this is going to be a float probably. And it's going to be equal to so vector3.distance is a method that's built into Unity that will give you the distance between two different positions. So the first position is going to be our own position, the position of the enemy, transform.position. And the next one needs to be the position of the player. So what we need to do is actually get a reference to the player object. So we're going to create a new variable at the top here. We're going to call it GameObjectPlayer. And when we start the game, we're actually going to do a find on that object. So GameObject.find object with tag player. Now what this will do is this will find the object in the level that has the tag player. So we're going to set player equal to this. And then in our update method here, we'll do player dot transform dot position. All right, and we're going to have a public variable here that determines how far away our enemy will be from the player before he starts attacking. So we'll call this attack distance. And we'll set this equal to 3. And this is a float, so we'll just go ahead and add that in here. And we need another one in here that we'll call seek distance. Public float seek distance. We'll say it's 5F. Alright, I'm going to go through a little bit of code here very fast, and then I'll explain it in detail at the end. What we're doing here is actually setting up logic for our enemy to seek our player. Okay, so what this code actually says is if the distance between me, my enemy character, and the player is less than the distance that I've specified I want to attack my enemy, we're going to invoke our attack method in 0.2 seconds. We want to do it in 0.2 seconds because there's a little bit of delay between when the animation plays and when it completes. Then it says, else if the distance between me and the player is less than my seek distance, I want to move closer toward the player. Now we just need to add some logic for moving toward the player. So we need to determine what direction the player is from the character. All right, before we write this move toward method, I want to explain a little bit about 2D games. So in 2D games, there are position coordinates on every object in Unity. There's an X and a Y. And in 2D games, we don't really care about Z, but X and Y are important. So X is represented by the horizontal of your game, the horizontal axis, and Y is the vertical. So if you go to the transform and you move your X axis, you'll see that it changes this value depending on where he is on the screen. So if I move him to the left, the value gets smaller, and if I move him to the right, the value gets bigger. So this we can use to tell where the player is in relation to the enemy. So if we compare the mushroom's X value of -2 to the character's X value of -8, we'll know that since -8 is less than -2, we'll know that he is to the left of our character. So we will need to flip around and move toward that direction. So let's go ahead and start implementing something like that. So we're just going to call a method called move toward player. And this method doesn't exist yet, so we have to write one. So let's go in here, delete that, and we're going to create a public void, I guess we could private, method called move toward player. And what we need to do is calculate what direction the enemy is from us. So if player dot transform dot position dot x is less than our own transform dot position dot x, we want to move left. Else we want to move right. So to move our character, what we want to do is we want to make sure that our local scale is set to -1 or -3, I think. Let's take a look. So in our mushroom, we set our scale to 2.5. So if we need to go left, we want to make sure that our x is set to -2.5 so that our character will flip around and face that direction. So first thing we want to do is go to transform dot scale, local scale, and so it has get and set. Okay, so we want to set this equal to, what is it? It is a vector 3. Okay, so we need to create a new vector. And we want -2.5, 2.5 for the y because he's not getting any smaller, and 0 for the z because we don't use it. Now we only actually want to do this if our scale is not already negative. So we're going to do another if here. So if our local scale copy that. That's not what I wanted. So if our local scale dot x is equal to or is greater than 0, basically. So if it's a positive number, we want to flip it. All right. And then we want to start moving toward the enemy. So if we're facing in the right direction, we want to start translating toward the character, the enemy character. So we want to do our transform dot translate and we want, let's see here. Okay, so what we want to do is we want to move in a certain direction. So we want to move in our transform dot right times our direction. Now, direction is going to be a number that's either 0 or 1 based on the direction we want to go. So we also, inside this if statement, is set a direction. So we're going to declare one up here. We're going to call it an integer direction, and it's going to equal this Boolean. So if this evaluates to true with our ternary, then we want this to be -1. Else we want this to be 1. So what this is called a ternary expression. So this is an if statement. This is an if, then this, else, then this. So if our x of the player is less than the x of our enemy, return -1. So if we multiply right by -1, we're going to get left, which is the direction that we want to move. So now that we've kind of made this independent of this if block, we can actually extract it. So we cut this out here, and we'll put it at the bottom. Else for move right, we need the same code, but we want to flip it. So if local scale is less than 0, then we want to change it to the positive version of itself. So this if block is literally just to flip our character around to face the correct direction. So also when we're moving our character, we want to move in a certain speed over time.delta time. So times direction times speed, which we haven't set up yet. We'll set it up here in a second. Times time.delta time. So it doesn't recognize speed as variable because we haven't created yet. So let's go ahead and declare a speed variable up here. Public speed float. It's a float. We'll set it to 10 to start. And that should be that. So now our character will move toward the enemy. Maybe I spelled something wrong. Yeah, I did. Move toward our enemy if he is in range. So if we go to the mushroom, we need to go to his rigid body, and we need to freeze his Z so that he can not flip around like he was. So what we actually need to do is reduce our attack distance so that it's more reasonable, and maybe increase our seek distance. I think our attack distance is probably something very small because his attack box is very small. So I'm going to change it to like 1.2 maybe. And let's go ahead and go back into our enemy script. I'm going to change the speed to maybe like 3. Now we just need to make it so that our character dies if he gets hit by the mushroom. So let's go ahead and code that. I'll put this back over here. And what we want to do is go into our player, go to the character, go to our inspector, and we actually want to write into our character script. So edit script. And so first we need to make sure that we have a collision box for our character for when he gets hit. Right now he only has his actual collision box. So he needs a collision box to determine if he gets hit by an enemy. So we need a box 2D. This one is a trigger. Let's go to our scene view so we can see how big it is. And we're going to make it pretty small comparatively. Alright, so if his core body is triggered, then it should trigger like a death. So let's go ahead and do that. And now that we have that, we can go into our character and we can write a method for onTriggerEnter 2D. And if collision dot I don't know, compare tag, perfect, is equal to attack. So this will return a Boolean. So if the tag on the item that we're colliding with is attack, then we want to do some sort of logic like death. So I already wrote a method for like fall death. So that's what it's trying to trigger, which just spawns us back at the beginning. So let's take a look. We want to create a new method for void death And if our character dies, we just want to delete him, or destroy him, I mean. So destroy game object. This means destroy my game object. We want to do it in 2 seconds. So destroy has an optional parameter of when to destroy. So destroy this game object in 2 seconds. And we want to do anim dot set bool or set bool. Death equal to true. All right. So if our character gets hit, he should play this death animation and then destroy himself. So we haven't created the death animation yet. So we need to go into assets, martial hero, sprites, death, copy all of these frames, drag it into the hierarchy, hero death animation. This is going to create 2 things. We're going to drag them into the character animations folder. We don't need the death controller. In the character controller, we need an additional animation called death. So we just drag the animation in here for death. And if we click on hero death, okay, so I made 2 for death. So I'm going to delete this death, and I'm going to pull in hero death that I made just now. And if we click on hero death, we see that this animation is 0.5 seconds long. So we're going to go back to our code. We're going to change this delete to 0.5 seconds. All right. And then if our character dies in any animation state, we want him to play this animation. So if he is running, and we're going to add a parameter for death. It's Boolean, so we'll call death here. And if death, play this animation, has no exit time, play it immediately. And we need to copy this transition for every other animation. So if transition death is true, no exit time, make transition death if you're jumping. Death, no exit time. Make sure I didn't put one on here. Yep. And if falling. And that one is a little hard to click on, so I'm going to drag death over here. No exit time, conditions, death. Okay, so now, if our character gets hit by an attack in any animation, he should play this death animation. So let's go ahead and test it out. He gets hit and he dies. So he dies pretty much instantly and plays that death animation. And I forgot to delete the extra animation on the screen here, so I'll just kill this. And I want him to die a little bit slower. So it looks like we also have an error here. So we're missing a reference exception because if we destroy the player, then the mushroom no longer knows where to go. So we're going to put this in an if block to say if player not equal to null. This will prevent any of this code from executing if the player has been deleted. So put this whole thing in there, and now we don't have to worry about it. So it seems like the animation of the attack happens basically in our code when we execute the attack in the enemy script. We call this attack method. Okay, so here's the problem. In our mushroom has this attack object. It's always active. So as soon as he becomes in range of this attack, our character dies, because this is always active. It's as if he's always attacking. So we want to disable this by checking this box here. And then in our attack method, we want to enable it. So in attack, we want attack box dot set active to true. And then we want to invoke another method that we haven't written yet. So I'm going to invoke end attack, and we're going to do it in like 0.25 seconds. So the way this will work right now is if we are attacking in 0.2 seconds, enable the attack, and then in 0.25 seconds, disable it later. Disable it. So let's look at the length of the animation for the mushroom's attack. Go to mushroom, monster attack, mushroom attack. It is 0.67 seconds. So we really only want to do this in the last like 0.2 seconds maybe. So we're going to invoke attack at 0.4 seconds, and then at 0.67 we want to disable it. So we invoke attack 0.4 seconds, create the box, and then 0.26 we want to disable the box. All right, so now this box will not do anything because we still haven't disabled it. So we want to write a new method called void end attack that only does this one thing, and it's attack box dot set active false. So this will disable the box from colliding with our character. So let's go ahead and hit play and try it out. We go in range, he attacks, and our character dies. Cool. So that is now working as we intended. I do want to set this animation a little bit after he takes damage instead of dying absolutely immediately. So I'm actually going to invoke death in 0.5 seconds. So invoke the method death, comma to separate the parameters, 0.5 seconds, and then die. So once we get hit by the mushroom, there will be a pause, and then he'll die. And 0.5 is a little bit too long, it looks like, so I'm going to shorten that out to 0.25. And 0.25 is still, I didn't save it. So I'll save it, try it again. All right, I'm pretty satisfied with that. So now what I want you guys to do is actually create a death animation for the monster. So if we play the game and we press our attack button, we kill the monster, but he doesn't play any animation, he just disappears. So I want you guys to do the same thing that we just did for the character, but do it for the monster and play his death animation instead. The completed copy of this code will be in the description down below. Thank you guys for watching. If you liked, please like the video and subscribe, and leave me a comment down below. Thanks.